Hello, welcome back to DiceGoblin. Today we're going to be talking about my experience as a professional game master. It all started 3 years ago. Our third birthday was all the way back in February. But ever since then, I opened a store called DiceGoblin here in Auckland, New Zealand. And since then, I have been running role-playing games from that day onwards. So it started off with only like 3 games a week, and then it slowly built up to what has been happening for over 2 years now, 13 games a week that I run. Most of them are games that I run myself. 1 game a week I kind of reserve to myself as I get to play, so I don't get the title of the forever GM, okay? But long story short, it started off as a little project between me and my brother, where my father had his shop that the lease was going to end, and we decided that, hey, let's go do something together. And we were thinking about, do we do internet cafes or do we do something else? And then all of a sudden we're like, wait, he likes trading card games, I like role-playing games, and we both like board games. So we decided to create a tabletop gaming space here in Auckland, New Zealand, where everybody can come in, have fun and play, and just basically a cool ass place to hang out in. So if you guys are ever in Auckland, come visit DiceGoblin. It's a shameless plug, eh? Anyway, so basically that's how it started, and my journey into charging people money to roleplay with me is since then, because, you know, to keep the lights on and whatnot, etc. And now role-playing games is the biggest income earner that I have here at the store. So I'd argue it's about like 60, maybe even 70% of our overall income that we generate from the store. Like, don't get me wrong, card gamers, they spend a lot of money, but we're paying a lot of money to bring in the product and so on and so forth. But anyway, that's a whole nother video that if I decided to make it in the future, we can talk about the nuts and bolts of running a hobby store. If you guys are interested in learning more about that, write it in the comments, and we'll see. If we get enough people, then maybe I'll make one. Anyway, let's start off with how it came to be 13 hours. Sorry, take it back. 13 sessions a week, which I think the last time I calculated was around like 48 to 50 hours of GMing. So the trick is I run the store and I run games at the same time, and that makes it so that I don't have to charge an arm and a leg for my sessions, and at the same time, you know, people can come in and enjoy themselves for the sessions that we have. Running that many games in the beginning felt impossible. Well, I've always been the optimistic person, so my mates, when they were telling me like, "Are you crazy for running 3 games a week? That's gonna exhaust you," and I'm like, yeah, but it's so much fun. And one thing led to another. Now we have 23 games happening in the week, and I proudly run 13 games of them. With that in mind, it went all the way from running games from kids as young as 8-year-olds to all the way, I think one of my oldest players that comes to the store, he doesn't play with me, but plays on a separate thing, and I think he's in like late 70s, early 80s. I think I heard it once that he told me his age, but forgot about it. But yeah, so we have a massive demographic. Majority of the people are within their 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, my age. Believe it or not, I'm 35 this year, so it's been a few, but I'm super glad to see so many people my age are like into the hobby. So it was a little bit of a surprise, because the majority of the people the demographic, so to speak, are in their 20s, and there is more than a handful of people that are in their 30s as well. But anyway, let's go down to talking about developing the skills to be able to run, first of all, so many games, and then second of all, like, what does it take to be a professional game master, right? The long and short of it, I guess if you get paid for it, that kind of constitutes it as a professional game master. Being able to make a living out of it is even a better feeling, because, you know, doing something you love. And by the way, anybody that says that doing something you love as a from a hobby to like a professional thing, you're gonna hate it, they don't know what they're talking about. See, the only time that it becomes something that you hate is if you start doing things you don't like. Okay, so I found myself in that space about a year and a half ago, roughly, where I actually didn't like the way my games were going, just because it was like almost about a year, actually, a year and a bit. But I didn't like where my games were going, and so I started to feel a little bit anxious, but mostly just frustrated with the way the story was going. And without sounding too horrible, I had the opposite effect of a Matt Mercer effect. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but how I had a level of expectations for my players. After playing with so many players, there was like, oh, these players are good, and I was enjoying playing with these guys, and when the other players couldn't do that thing, I started frustrating me, because they were like, but it's so simple, you guys could just do this. But learning that everybody has their own pace, everybody has their own stories that they want to tell, and not everybody plays the same, and you know, you can have preferences and stuff like that, etc. The way that I kept saying throughout this whole ordeal is a lot of you, if any of you get to talk to in the community here at DiceGoblin, you'll see a group of people that would have probably had more than one games changed on them. And I'm the kind of person that if I don't like something, I just can't give it my all. And if I can't give it my all, then what's the point of doing it, right? So I killed a lot of games before they finished, and like, you know, I understand that people get frustrated with it, but if I don't have the inspiration to continue the story, then it kind of just kills the momentum for me. But then also I just start finding the shortest path to end, and it would not be satisfactory for me, even though it sounds very horrible. And in hindsight, I probably should have done like a last session or last 2 sessions just to wrap everything up. It was very challenging to continue the story, and so for me it was just, so long as I had fun, I kept going doing the story. So basically, so long as you work on something that you actually enjoy, then that's okay, because don't forget, you are also a player. Even though you're getting paid to do this thing, I arguably got more leeway than most. So like, if I was getting like a super like proper pay, like, you know, worth my time kind of pay, I wouldn't mind, and I will do it a session even if I quote unquote don't like it, because at a certain level you just got to do it. But then I know there's like a little bit of a coin flip of what they want to sell your soul or whatever, but I know how to make things enjoyable enough to, you know, sustain it at least for a short period of time. I've done it for more than 2 years, so I'm sure I can do it for a few sessions. But the idea is, so long as you do something you enjoy, so long as you do it because you want to do it, you are also a player. As a GM, you are also a player. And so long as you understand that you are a player, everything else just falls into place. And you deserve to have fun too. So anybody else who says otherwise is just flat out wrong. That's the long and short of it. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. We were actually supposed to be talking about developing the skills to run it. Developing the skills, you need to know how to tell good stories, but that can only, like, if you watch movies, you can tell good stories. If you read books, you can tell good stories. If you watch a ton of YouTube content, you can tell good stories. Honestly, most people can tell good stories, and it's just about tapping into that, like, reservoir of knowledge. Like, the amount of time that I spent when I was young watching movies, TV shows, and a whole lot of other stuff, it felt like, and arguably for most people that would look at it from like an outside perspective, was a waste of time. It was just from entertainment purposes, and I was just quote unquote having fun. But now I found like everything that I did in my life have just slowly built me up to the point where now I have a massive library of knowledge inside my head of just pulling something from the shelf and we're like, run, we're gonna have this character now come in, and that character will have traits from all these 3 or 4 shows that just got inspired by it, and then the players love him or whatever, you know? So from that perspective, telling good stories, everybody can do it, but it is a little bit of it's an art, just like painting and so on and so forth. So learning as you go is my favorite thing to do. When I first picked up the Dungeon Master manual, I looked at it and I was like, nah, I'm not reading that. Like, that was just too much words. If you guys don't know me, I read a lot, but I hate reading. So I know it's a little bit of a weird thing, but I'm not a big fan of like reading a lot of content, you know? I rather consume it through audio or like visual mediums, I guess. But ultimately, I prefer to learn as I play. And so when I first started GMing, which was like 12 years ago, God, that was it's been a while, when I was at uni, and it was actually more, actually it might have been 13 years. Anyway, since I started GMing with my just small group of friends, we took the book and we're like, okay, so this is the concept, you roll a d20 and this is for the damage, cool, this is exciting, let's run a game. And then as we played, we got to places where like, oh, we're falling, I wonder how falling damage works. And then we looked up the rule and then we learned how falling damage works, and now I know how falling damage works, and then we closed the book. And then after that we played some more, and then we were like, oh, I wonder how paralyze works, and then we opened the book and we read paralyze. Or I wonder how, you know, acid damage actually affects your armor or whatever. Oh, there's no rules on that, so I guess, do we homebrew it? I guess. And then we started homebrewing our own stuff, and it just kept building on from there. So there's a lot of people that talk about how you need to learn the system before you play, or a lot of people like stress out a lot about wanting to run a system, and so they need to like consume the entire thing before they run it. You don't need to do that. I guess that some people, they need that as like a source of like confidence, I guess, to have that like security. But honestly, if you have a cool group of friends, well, most friends groups should be cool, right? But if you have a good group of friends around you that are there just to have fun and support you, then it doesn't matter. You guys can fumble together, and that's kind of the point of this experience, or at least my version of that experience. I had a lot of fun doing it, and over the years that we did, we built up a whole lot of campaigns. Many fell through, many missed sessions, many conflict of scheduling and whatnot, etc. But one of my favorite times when I was younger playing this game, we used to literally go to McDonald's, and because they used to open like, well, they still do, open to 24 hours. And we'd sit inside and roleplay there because none of us could actually get permission from our parents to do it at our house, or like, you know, we couldn't ask our parents because of XYZ reasons and yada yada yada. And so we'd literally meet up there and then have our sessions at McDonald's. And honestly, that's why I created DiceGoblin. I wanted a space for people to be like, hey, we needed a space to sit down and have fun. It's like, cool, come to DiceGoblin and play. Also, Game Masters play for free here, so it's also another point benefit. Give something back to the Game Masters for doing so much work. All right. Other skills that you need is good listening skills. So there's a difference between listening, like actually paying attention to what's been told, and hearing. Because you can hear a whole lot of stuff and not really react to it or take it in. Being a good listener is actually taking in the information that was said by the players. Lack of a better term, it's more exciting from a GM point of view to say, and then you can use it against them, but also you can use it to their benefit. So if a player goes around and is like, oh my god, it'll be so cool if this device is gonna open the walls and yada yada yada, this and that, and you had no plans for that, but you thought to yourself, actually that does sound cool, and all of a sudden you do it and you're like, you got it right, good job, and then you don't tell them that was not even planned, because you let them have the amazing feeling of them guessing it and figuring it out. And if it tells a better story, then why not go for a better story? And so by seeing the conversation between the players, seeing the conversation with them and the NPC, having that duality of like trying to understand what it is that the story wants you to do and what is it that they want to do internally, and then bringing that to the forefront. It's, lack of a better term, it's such an essential skill that if you can actually listen to your players properly, then their enjoyment will consistently be high. While if you don't listen to them properly, then you're going to miss on the cues and you're going to miss on the various opportunities for them to tell the stories that they want to tell, and then the story or the session just falls flat on its face. So yeah, listening is an amazing ability to do. Being adaptable is super important, because no matter how much prep you have done, the players will somehow find a way to completely throw everything on this upside down and sideways and all over the place. It's beautiful as well, by the way. And when a player or the players come up with a very genius concept that they get to go and throw everything upside down. Like, there was this one thing that happened with me. I spent a good 2-3 weeks and maybe like a good part of 10 hours handcrafting an entire prison system, building something like 100 different NPCs for them, building entire story arcs and different prison gangs and a whole lot of stuff, and everything, the dynamic between them and the different relationships and the tensions and the alliances and all that fun stuff, right? Only for the players to go, right, we have a bag of holding, right, we're gonna buy a potion of water breathing, and they have their changeling go in, drink the potion of water breathing. They cast Enlarge Reduce on him to shrink him down, jumps inside of the bag of holding. And then after that, they get to walk inside the prison. They get to have a meeting with the guy in the question. At the time, I remember that they ended up doing a whole bunch of checks to trick the security guards from watching. And then after that, one of them goes, take off your clothes. They undo the thing. The changeling comes up. They wear the clothes of the person, change to the face of the guy, and they walk in. He gets to use a potion of Enlarge Reduce to reduce themselves, and then they jump into the bag of holding after drinking a water breathing potion, which lasts for an hour or 8 hours or some crazy number like that. Anyway, long enough for them to go in and out without unnoticed. And they do all of this only for the changeling to then wild shape into some sort of, I think they were high enough for a bird. Long story short, they just ran away. The changeling walked in and escaped almost immediately before anybody could notice a thing, right? All of this happened. In hindsight, I could have they have anti-magic zones, so your bag doesn't work, or blah 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 blah. I could have done all these things, but at the time I never thought about it, and I'm glad I did it. It made for a better story for them to feel so awesome coming up with this plan for it to work. But on that note, I never used that prison. That whole scene, that whole interaction was them supposed to be prison escape, or I forgot what the show was called, but when they get to voluntarily go to prison by committing some crime, and then as they're inside, they're gonna try to find a way to dig themselves out, Shawshank Redemption and stuff like that. But anyway, that was the entire concept. After that, I ended up just keeping it to the side, but I haven't had the chance to use it yet. And on that same note, my skill that I have learned is never throw away your prep, and also always prep. I know this sounds very tedious at first, and it takes a lot of time, and people get like, oh, but you know, like they change the things or whatever. Always prep. But the trick is, don't throw away your prep. Keep it. Maybe you can use it later in the future, or better yet, if they decide to divert and go a completely different route, and you've had like a certain battle or whatever that is like made with a bunch of bandits, but they're now in like orc territory, all of a sudden just convert their bandits to orcs. And not gonna lie, you could probably use the same stats, but just flavor them differently, the way they act, you know? And you can even throw in a few like, you know, raging barbarian-esque kind of characters in there as well. The idea is you don't throw away prep, because as soon as you do, you start to overwork yourself and constantly be coming up with new materials. And that's just exhausting, especially when you get to the stage where I am, it's of running so many games, and you can't afford to throw away prep. You know, for me, I got the luxury of like, hey, if it didn't work here, I could use it in this other session. But the idea still stands where I have done this before, where I've ran the same story arc with like multiple groups all at the same time, but it's just seeing where they were gonna go, and it's super fascinating because none of them copied each other's actions, which just goes to show you that every group dynamic is different. Being adaptable and playing on the fly is important, and understanding that you want to be flexible enough for them to do what they want, but also don't be afraid to say no, and stuff like that is just completely ridiculous. Like the trope of, I go to a king and I roll a 20 on persuasion, now I have his kingdom. That's just not ideal. But if the king was a nice king, he might look at him and say, you know what, the way you talk, the way you present yourself, you're going to be great. How about you become a dignitary? No, what is the word? The person that goes around like an ambassador. How about you become ambassador for me, as I want you to travel to this land? Which, nudge nudge wink wink, it's basically this story arc leading you there. But now you're going to become this person who's going to go there to talk to this nation to negotiate peace, because we're at the brink of war. That's a natural 20. Instead of going, you know, yeah, I give you my kingdom, which is dumb, or no, and then the player feels kind of bad. But if it's a bad king, like an evil king, he would look at him and laugh and says, you remind me of myself, or you have, you know, you have big balls on yourself or whatever, so make sure, like, I'm really impressed by this display of courage. You know what, I'll let you and your friends live for today. I was planning on killing you, but not today. You know, and that is the natural 20 success. And then all of a sudden it sets the tone that the king is, first of all, crazy because he was going to kill them with very little reason, and so on and so forth. But then at the same time, it's like, oh, okay, we just got out of the skin of our teeth thanks to this nat 20 roll. Same thing with like super high rolls, right? And if they rolled a nat 1, if the evil king shouldn't just be like outright just kill him, he'd be like, with this insolence, I'm going to imprison you or whatever. And then it becomes like a little bit of a battle sequence where they're trying to run away from the gods or whatever. And with the good king, he just looks at him in a very like sad way and says, I'm going to take this insult as a form of I'm not going to take it as an insult or whatever, and just kind of looks it away, but like they can feel that the tension is in the air now. Something along those lines. You know, you could tell a good story without having to take away from the players. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. All right, next thing we can talk about is about the learning process of running games. I am fortunate enough to run a lot of different games, different types of games, and have played in different types of games. And playing different systems has not only opened my eyes to different possibilities and different styles of telling stories, but honestly, if none of you guys have actually tried different systems and your group is like not completely gung-ho about playing D&D and only D&D, seriously try out other systems. You'll quickly realize that D&D is a combat game, and if you want to play a combat game, D&D is a perfect system for it. I actually would recommend it in a heartbeat. It's like, I think I spent 6,500 hours on D&D alone, because just the sheer popularity of it and the amount of games that are run for it. But the idea is, it is effectively a combat game. Yes, it has skills. Yes, it has a whole lot of other things, but it is done so beautifully in the way that it's structured to be a good combat game. Okay? From a role-playing point of view that wants to tell like a particular kind of story, there is so many others. Like, if you just want to worry about the story and just want to tell a particular kind of story, Powered by the Apocalypse and the many systems that have used it to tell those stories with the 2d6 system, amazing. And it's simple, easy to use, easy to learn, and you're just there focused to tell a good story. And it's a beautiful system. Anything else? The new Daggerheart has kind of gotten the best of both worlds. You know, they got the combat of D&D, they got the story of Powered by the Apocalypse, they combine it together, and they're trying to make it some sort of new hybrid of the two. I love Daggerheart and what they've done. It is the system that I feel like it's really ideal for my style of play. I probably will create another video that talks about my pet peeves of Daggerheart after playing like almost 100 sessions. Anyway, so yeah. Long story short, that's you basically get to play different systems, learn the different systems, understand the different types of stories, like horror stories and stuff. Call of Cthulhu does it really well, but it's also like Call of Cthulhu is very like specific on that insanity metric. While I played certain Powered by the Apocalypse stories that have different types of horror elements, and I played this one game called 10 Candles, and it is such a surreal game. And it's the whole concept of the game is, at the end of the session, everyone dies. That's like when the last candle gets blown out, everybody's dead. And that in and of itself, you get to get set up to start the game knowing this information. And by knowing this, you get to start to deal with the story of like this last surviving group of people before this horrible thing is going to happen. And those stories have hit me completely differently, and I cherish their memories very deeply. Anyway, let's move on to the final things. Challenges that I faced being a professional game master. You see, the biggest challenge is making enough money to justify it being your job. I charge effectively $15 per person, because it's $10 for the store and $5 for the GM kind of deal that we have this set up here in DiceGoblin. But realistically, that's not enough. That's not enough to sustain a good life of like paying the bills and stuff. The way that I've managed to make it is by having a store that can do all of these things and have a consistent platform for, you know, people to come in and have fun and play games and stuff. And that's how I've made my living. I am currently, you know, looking into going deeper into the like corporate market and trying to do like, you know, like team building exercises for role-playing games and the like, etc. And seeing if that can make a much better like financial return, so to speak. And even if that happens, then I keep the store open and stuff like that, because my ultimate goal here is to make DiceGoblin free to play. So you just come in and have fun and play and go home, you know? It does not have the restriction of people needing to need money to enjoy themselves in a safe space. But that's another kettle of fish. But yeah, if that works, then I would have achieved it as a like earning a living kind of deal from professional GMing. But I have achieved that in my current state because of running the store. I do run it solo, but that just covers all the bills as well as my, you know, living expenses and whatnot. And that's pretty much it. That is the biggest challenge, is actually making it worth your while. And I know it's very difficult in the beginning if you're trying to be a professional GM yourself, just because of the sheer hours and stuff like that, etc. If I ever had to do this by having a quote-unquote like stereotypical job from the 9 to 5 kind of deal, I would probably do sessions as a part-time thing and go onto the various different websites out there that actually can offer services for professional GMing for people looking to play online, and charge $20 or $25 per person and slowly build up that experience. And then eventually you'll start to get good enough, and when you get good enough, you start charging more, and so on and so forth. And it sounds very like, you know, the standard steps that people can take, but honestly, I don't think it's much more difficult than that. It is just as simple as building up a skill, just like any other skill out there. Yeah, otherwise, then you get to enjoy 7,000 hours of role-playing experience under your belt, and then you get to do other stuff with it as well after that. In conclusion, that's my life story about how I became a professional GM. I have noticed that I ramble a lot in my videos, so if you watch all of them all the way through, do write in the comments below whether you enjoy that kind of content, or should I like specifically condense it to be more like on point and deliver the messages across. I enjoy sitting here talking to the camera the way I am right now. Yeah, give me a shout, let me know what it is, what you guys think. Also leave a like, subscribe, and yeah, we'll see you in the next video.